It wasn't a house one would be inclined to enter voluntarily. Indeed, it was a house most people would be inclined to avoid. 11 but almost 12-year-old Samantha Schulman conjured the word dilapidated from her vocabulary-filled mind. It was a good word, but not quite the right one. It wasn't quite descriptive enough. It was a word that could almost certainly be used to describe a house that was old and falling into disrepair. And while this was certainly true of certain sections of the house, other sections had been mutated somehow, by some strange force, so that they hardly resembled parts of a house at all. One wall resembled the waxy residue from a melting candle. Another seemed to actually have icicles hanging down from the gutter, which would have been slightly less unnerving had the icicles been made of water, rather than pieces of the gutter itself. And the roof was completely obscured by a thick cloud of fog, which seemed to emanate from the house itself. Most people would agree that the appearance that a structure is either melting, freezing, or evaporating does not tend to inspire confidence. No, dilapidated wasn't the right word. There really wasn't a right word for this type of house. One that was old, falling apart, mutated almost beyond recognition, and yet infinitely substantial. Otherworldly, maybe. Indeed, the fact that it was dilapidated wasn't the main reason why people would be likely to avoid this house. But it was possible that the fact that it was otherworldly was. For on top of its highly unusual appearance, this house had never been seen in the town of Samuel Springs before that day. It had not been recently constructed or dropped off. It had simply appeared. No one knew where it had come from or what was inside it, and no one seemed in a big hurry to find out either. Samantha understood all of this, and wholeheartedly echoed the sentiment. If it had been up to her, she would never have gone near the house. As a matter of fact, if it had been up to her, she wouldn't have been out there at all. Scrawny and freckly, Samantha Schulman was about as adventurous as Whitebread, and was never one for exploring anything that was even the least bit out of the ordinary, or otherworldly. Unfortunately, it wasn't up to her, because Samantha was best friends with Tabitha Forrester. Tabitha was as aggressive, overpowering, and pushy as Samantha was passive, timid, and meek. But above all else, Tabitha was mischievous. Every time she got a gleam in her eye, everyone around her looked for somewhere else to be. She was fiendishly clever for a 12-year-old, and she was always scheming. And Samantha usually ended up being either an accomplice or a target for her pranks. Now Tabitha was eyeing the odd house with that gleam in her eye. Unfortunately, Samantha had nowhere else to be. "Look at it, Sam," she said, practically drooling over the house indecently. "Just look at it." "I'm looking," Samantha said shortly. And she was, but not in quite the same way as Tabitha. Tabitha was almost stalking the house with her eyes, like a hungry predator. Samantha's look bore a closer resemblance to that of a wary gazelle. "Shouldn't we be heading back to the house? We've still got a whole hour," Tabitha said, glancing briefly at her watch. "Come on." "But it doesn't even look like anyone lives here," Samantha protested. "So no one will mind if we poke around a bit. Let's go." Tabitha, sadly, had a sense of logic and morality that didn't quite mesh with Samantha's, or really anyone else's. She also had a bad habit of understating things. Poking around to most people would mean just walking around the house, maybe peeking in the windows, maybe even being brave enough to open the door and shout inside to see if anyone was home. But Samantha knew that Tabitha wouldn't be satisfied that she had poked around enough until she knew the location of every creaky floorboard in the building. "Look at it, Tab," Samantha said. "The building could come crashing down around our ears. It's pretty dilapidated." "What-a-dated?" Tabitha asked. "You read too much, Sam. Come on. It's not going to fall down. Look, it has a roof and everything." Samantha sighed. "Did you ever think that there might be a reason why it's abandoned?" Samantha pointed out. "Of course," Tabitha said excitedly. "That's the whole point. This is what Halloween's all about, going out and getting the crap scared out of you." It was this, more than anything, that had kept Samantha indoors for the last 5 Halloweens. There had been a time when Samantha had enjoyed, as Tabitha had so eloquently put it, getting the crap scared out of her. But she had grown out of that rather abruptly. Halloween seemed to be focused around things like this house, things that were otherworldly. Samantha would have preferred for otherworldly things to stay in the other world where they belonged. Tabitha, however, had never seemed to care. "Come on," Tabitha said, her voice growing surprisingly gentle as it usually did when she knew that Samantha was losing an argument. "If it gets too scary, we can always turn around and leave, right?" Samantha hesitated a moment longer. "All right," she said. "Let's go." She followed Tabitha, reluctantly, to the house. And that, really, is how it all began. Hayley, you just heard a cut-for-time version of the first scene of my work in progress, which is entitled 13 Tombs. The first draft of the 13 Tombs was actually written as an English assignment in 7th grade. At the time, it was two boys going into the creepy house, and it was basically just your typical badly told campfire story. Two boys go into this house and they see all these dead bodies and they run away scared, and the 13th tomb is their own grave. That was basically it. But as I entered high school and my writing began to mature a little bit, I took another look at that story and I fleshed it out, and I added new characters and I added a backstory, and now it's the first of a series. I have a lot of works in progress because I kind of write the way I read. I write several things at once. I'll start writing something and then I'll get an idea for something else and I'll leave this by the wayside and go work on this other thing, and I have a hard time finishing things. For the moment I'm content just writing to write. But it would be really wonderful if I could get published one day. So, Hayley, to answer your question, our five favorite things, or the 5 best things ever, something along those lines. Let's see, I'm gonna say books, musical theater, vlogging, writing, and let's say music. No, that's cheating. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna pick something else. I am gonna keep music as one of the 5 things. The second thing, I'll kind of combine books and writing into the written word. For number 3, this is going to sound kind of corny, but I'm going to say friendship. Our ability as human beings to form bonds with people. Number 4 is imagination. And for number 5, I'm going to go ahead and steal from your current One Awesome fanboy, Alex, and say number 5 is what was found on the bottom of Pandora's box. Hayley, I hope you found this somewhat enjoyable. Leanne, I haven't seen your video yet, but as always, I look forward to it. But your response, you're not going to be receiving at least until Monday, and you'll find out why then. See you later.